the institutions of government. The institutions, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. We'll start with Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 1 deals with the legislative branch, all right? Congress. So, Section 1 to 7 gives us the congressional structures and processes, and Section 8 of Article 1 deals a lot with the enumeration of powers of Congress. So we see the structures or the limits of the jurisdictions of Congress, and then we see the enumeration of the powers of Congress. All right, so the House of Representatives has 435 members, Senate has 100 members. How we calculate the Electoral College is to take the members, total number of members of Congress plus Washington, D.C. All right. So the House of Representatives is the lower house. You have to be 25 years of age, have lived in the United States for 7 years. Members of the House of Representatives serve for 2-year terms. All right. And they have certain powers, like most of the funding bills start with them. All right. In leaderships, the presiding officer of the House of Representatives comes from the majority party, of course, because they have the majority vote. And so the Speaker of the House is the presiding officer of the House of Representatives, followed by the majority leader and the minority leader, who represent their parties in the floor of the House. You have other leadership. You have the majority and minority whip. These are the people, whips are to try and caucus everybody, try to bring everybody together to vote and to flow in the same policy or public policy direction. That's their job. And then you have people like minority and party conference chairman for the majority party and the minority party. They organize the policies of the party and organize the members in order to work in committees, etc. So these are among the type of leaders that we will see in Congress in the House of Representatives. All right. The upper house is the Senate. You have to be at least 30 years of age. So the higher the position, the higher the criteria, right? So in the Senate, you got to be 30 years of age, lived in America for at least 9 years to qualify. They serve for terms of 6 years. So while members of the House are up for election every even year, members of the Senate, a third of them are up for election every even year. They're supposed to be the more regal, the more upper house. If you can think of England, you can think of the House of Lords versus the House of Commons, all right? And so they have certain powers. For example, they have powers of advise and consent, which we'll talk about later, approval powers, and they also deal with executive business that we will talk about. Now, in terms of leadership, the presiding officer of the Senate is called the President of the Senate. That is the Vice President of the United States of America. All right. Now, the person who serves most of the times as the leader is called the President pro tempore, and that is the person who will be presiding, because in the modern Senate, the Vice President mostly works in the cabinet, in the executive branch, more than being a member of the legislative branch. But in the beginning, that was not the case. The Vice President worked more like a lieutenant governor in a state, who most of their responsibility and work is in the legislative branch. What the Vice President mostly does is to show up whenever there are ties, right? You have 50 senators on this side and 50 on this side, or an impasse in the numbers. He comes and breaks the tie, right? And he's also there for official functions as the head. Now, of course, like the minority or the lower house, rather, there's the majority, minority leaders who represent their parties in the floors, the majority, minority whips, and conference chair people whose job is to organize the party's policy agenda. The legislative branch. There are two chambers. Right, we have the Senate, we have the House of Representatives. We have two chambers. That makes our legislative branch bicameral, right? Bicameral. All right. The members of the Senate represent states, and there are two per state. right? Making 100, right? 100 of them. And the House of Representatives, we have 435. They represent judicial districts within states. Every bill, before it becomes an act or law, must pass both chambers. All right, and a few terms. When they're meeting, we say they're in session, right? They're in a session. Quorum is the minimum number of members needed to carry out a function of Congress in their different spaces. An adjournment is the end of a meeting, a formal ending of a meeting. Adjournment, sine die, means they have closed the congressional session completely. A recess is a small break that they can take, like a holiday break. Committee of the whole is just not used so much anymore, but it's a more informal meeting of all members to have a more general discussion of policy consideration. Okay? Now, how do bills become law? First, there's an author or a sponsor, and they can be also co-sponsors to a bill. So the bill is introduced. When it's introduced, it's calendared, right? The way you can calendar an event, when it's going to be heard, when things are going to happen. Now, every step it takes, it's called an action. If this was the last point that it stopped, that's called the last action. Right, so every step is called an action. The last the last movement of the bill, which is the legislative measure, is called the last action. Then, when it's calendared, it's referred. Now, it's referred to the proper committee, or rather, it's the subcommittee within a committee that deals with that particular issue area. Okay, so if you can think of, if you had all the juniors on the campus as Congress, and that would be the flow of the House if I assembled all of them. Now, in order for us to do all this work, we can't meet together and deal with every bill. It will take forever. So you spread the different members within committees and in the subcommittees. And most of the work of Congress resides in the subcommittee. That's where most of the work. So if you can think of a General Assembly, a classroom would be a subcommittee. All right. So most of the work happens in the subcommittee, and what they do is they do hearings and markups. Hearings is when they call people into their subcommittees to ask them questions. I can call in experts. Let's say I'm the subcommittee on agriculture or something in agriculture. Maybe I'm dealing with commodities, a subcommittee that deals with commodities. Then I'll bring in an expert who deals with commodities or livestock, and they'll give us their thoughts. So experts, etc. But subcommittees can do many other things. That you can do investigations, right? You can call maybe the Attorney General of America and question how she's handling a particular matter or issue. So most of the work of Congress is done in subcommittees that specialize in various areas of public policy. Markups are also done. Markups are just changes, additions, modifications that are done. After that, they can kill the bill or they can pass the bill. If it passes, it goes now to the floor, where you can have further debate and maybe a floor amendment. Now, after it passes all of this, it goes to the next chamber, where there's also a sponsor in that chamber who will guide it through the process. It will go to the appropriate committee of that other chamber. So if we started with the Senate, it will go to the House of Representatives, after which it will go all the way to the floor. Now we have two versions of the bill, because they made their changes and they made their changes. So now we have to go to a conference committee made up of members of both chambers. And that conference committee will make a conference report, work on changes. Finally, the bill will go back for final ascension, because now we have one version. And then now it will go to the President of the United States. All right? And so it's a long process to make laws. and how the laws pass. Now, the leader of each committee, most of the members will come from the majority party in power. All right, so the chairman of a committee or a chairperson of a committee comes from the majority party. And then for the minority party members in a subcommittee, they will be led by somebody called a ranking member, the highest ranking member of the minority party in a committee. When it reaches the president, it can either be signed into law, it can be vetoed, it can be, the president can be overridden by 2/3 of Congress when he vetoes. There can be a pocket veto in which if the president doesn't touch the bill, leaves it in his desk for 10 days, it becomes law. However, now he has 10 days to choose whether to veto or sign it. However, if Congress has ended its session before the 10 days are over, it is considered a pocket veto or an absolute veto in that Congress cannot challenge and override the president. Okay? Now, let's focus on the Senate in particular, because they have certain specialized powers that are quite interesting, and that is the power of advise and consent approval powers. Now, advise and consent. The role of the Senate to confirm presidential nominations for different posts and also assent on treaties. So, for example, this is called executive business. And at one point, I think in class, I will have the time to pull up executive business that you can find in the Senate website. So the president has a lot of things that he requires the legislative branch to approve, and this is done in the Senate. So the president nominates people for many positions. So the president can nominate you for to be a district attorney, a federal district attorney, for a member of the federal judiciary. He can nominate you to be a member of the cabinet, even the head of the U.S. Postal Service. There are so many commissions, boards, and different things that the president can nominate you to, but in order for you to take your sitting and take your position, it must be approved by the Senate. This is called executive business. And other things that the president does is the president can sign a treaty between the United States and another country. That also needs to go to the Senate for approval. So there's a lot of work called executive business that the Senate handles that the president requires approval for. And they vet such people. For example, if you've been nominated for to be a member of the federal judiciary, right, or you've been nominated to be a district attorney, right, you will go to the subcommittee on the judiciary or judicial committee for them to vet you and to approve your position, right? So to expedite the process or flow action on measures and matters in the Senate, they go on unanimous consent. So unanimous consent is an agreement that any questions or matters before the Senate should be set aside to expedite the process. So they want to expedite the process because they have a lot of work, including all this. For example, the president, when he wants to promote a whole bunch of members of the military, they all still have to go through to the Senate. So unanimous consent can help move the process more faster, right? Now, one thing is unanimous consent, once entered, can only be ended by unanimous consent. So even if one senator wishes to block the process, it can be blocked. So that's the challenge, but most of the time it doesn't happen. So unanimous consent is one rule they have in the Senate to help things move faster. Another rule that has come into question of recent times is the power of the filibuster, right? Now, what is a filibuster? Filibuster is obstructions or delays from a minority party to try and stop the majority from moving legislation or public policy forward. So, 1805, 1806, Aaron Burr is a vice president. And at this time, America doesn't have that many states either. He feels that the Senate should not be rushed in debate, that they should debate laws because they are the upper house, and therefore he argues that debate should not be ended with a simple majority. That's 50% plus one of the members. So he says, let's get rid of the idea of ending debate. Now, soon after that, senators realize, hey, even though I have less members than you, as long as I can keep the debate going, you won't have the ability to vote. And I will oppress and suppress your majority's will through all these procedures and all these methods of slowing down legislation. So 1917, President Wilson is annoyed when several senators begin to filibuster, right, his legislation, and he asks for a way to end debate, and this is called invoking cloture. So in 1917, it's 2/3. If 2/3 of the senators, which is a very high number, about 67 senators will be required to end debate. All right. Now that continues to be a challenge, especially in the 1960s. So by 1975, that number is reduced to 3/5. So you need 60 senators now to end debate, right? However, that threshold is still very high. It's quite hard in modern times to get over maybe 55 senators on your side. So you can still be filibustered, and that has become a power that has been highly abused in the modern Senate. As we can see, the longest filibustered bill in American history was the Civil Rights Act. For 57 days, they blocked this bill from moving forward. It actually took a coalition of Republicans with Northern and Western Democrats coming together to try and get the 2/3 from 1917. And then later on, I think because of this type of things, that threshold was reduced from 2/3 to 3/5 in 1975. However, that abuse continues to abound, especially starting with Obama's term in office. We saw extreme filibustering happening during his time, as a lot of his legislation was being blocked in the Senate, and that trend has unfortunately continued, more not to improve the legislation, but more to damage the other side's legislation. All right, that is the legislative branch.